Evelyn had always been a light sleeper, but lately, her nights had taken on an unsettling rhythm. Each evening she would drift off to sleep, only to jolt awake at exactly midnight, her heart pounding, her skin cold with sweat. At first, she chalked it up to stress or a strange new habit her body had developed. But then came the calming. Every morning, she'd find her dark, wavy hair smoothed into perfect, intricate braids or coiled into elegant updos, styles she never wore and certainly couldn't recreate herself in her sleep. The first few times, she tried to rationalize it. Had she sleepwalked? Had she forgotten doing it? The questions gnawed at her, but the answers never came. Then, one night, she woke not to the usual unease, but to the sharp click of an object placed on her nightstand. Her breath hitched as she reached out, fingers brushing cold, ornate metal. The hairbrush was antique, its handle carved with delicate filigree and embedded with tiny, chipped pearls. She'd never seen it before in her life. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach as she turned it over. The bristles were tangled with long, dark strands. Her hair, she realized, but they were too coarse, too thick, as if mixed with another's. The silence around her felt heavy, watchful. A faint floral scent, like old perfume, lingered in the air. She threw the brush into the drawer and slammed it shut, but the chill crawling up her spine refused to fade. Sleep didn't return that night. Instead, she sat rigid in bed, listening to the house creak around her, wondering what, or who, had been standing beside her in the dark. Evelyn's nights became a slow unraveling of dread. At first, the whispers were so faint she convinced herself they were the creaks of the old house, the settling of wood, the groan of pipes. But as the nights passed, they grew clearer, more deliberate, as if someone were standing just behind her, lips brushing her ear. The words were indistinct, a murmuring chant, but she caught fragments. Come the strands, midnight's touch, never fade. Each syllable sent a cold trickle down her spine. The whispers always came from the direction of the vanity mirror. Evelyn avoided it during the day, but at night, drawn by some morbid curiosity, she'd find herself staring into its depths, searching for the source of the voice. One evening, fueled by caffeine and fear, she dug into the house's history. The library's microfiche revealed a black and white photograph of her home, the caption beneath it chilling. Last known residence of Madame Lavinia Dalloway, renowned for her beauty, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. 1923. Further articles described Lavinia as a recluse, obsessed with preserving her youth. Neighbors reported hearing strange incantations at night, and one maid claimed to have seen Lavinia whispering to her reflection. The final entry in the local paper was a single line of authorities found the house empty, save for a single hairbrush atop the vanity, strands of silver hair tangled in its bristles. That night, the whispers grew louder, urgent. Evelyn pressed her palms to her ears, but the voice slithered through. You're next. When she dared to look up, the mirror fogged as if from breath, and for the briefest moment, the reflection of a pale hand, not hers, traced the outline of a comb through empty air. The chill of midnight settled over the room like a suffocating shroud as Evelyn's eyes snapped open, the familiar sensation of dread pressing down on her chest. She hadn't intended to wake, yet here she was, drawn once again to the unnatural pull of the witching hour. The air was thick with the scent of old roses and something darker, something rancid beneath the sweetness. Her pulse roared in her ears as she sat up, her hands trembling against the cold sheets. Then she saw it, the mirror. Her reflection should have been there, wide-eyed and disabled from sleep, but it wasn't her. A woman stood in her place, her skeletal fingers gliding through long, lustrous hair with the same antique brush that had appeared on Evelyn's nightstand. The woman's movements were slow, deliberate, each stroke impossibly smooth, as if she'd done this 1,000 times before. Her lips curled into a smile, too wide, too knowing, revealing teeth that glinted like polished bone. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She willed herself to move, to scream, to do anything, but her body refused to obey. Her reflection, no, not her reflection, held her captive with that ghastly grin. The woman's eyes, hollow and endless, locked onto hers, and Evelyn felt a searing pain at her scalp, as if unseen hands were tugging at her hair, strand by strand. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the vision dissolved. The mirror returned to normal, reflecting only Evelyn's pale, horrified face. But the brush was no longer on the nightstand. It lay on the dresser, as if it had been used moments ago. And on the floor, a single lock of her hair, severed cleanly at the root. The dusty attic seemed to hum with an unnatural energy as Evelyn pulled open the creaking trunk. Inside, beneath layers of yellowed lace and moth-eaten shawls, she uncovered a small leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age. The moment her fingers brushed the cover, a sharp pain shot through her skull. A fleeting image of a woman's face, gaunt and desperate, flashed behind her eyes. The ink had faded, but the words were clear enough. The diary belonged to Lillian Hart, the house's original owner, and it chronicled her obsession with preserving her beauty. At first, the entries were mundane, recipes for rosewater tonics, notes on avoiding the sun. But then, the tone shifted. Lillian wrote of waking at midnight to the sound of something, brushing her hair. She'd find strands tangled in the sheets, her scalp tender, as though unseen hands had been at work. March 12th, it whispers to me now. It says it will keep me young, but only if I let it in. I wake with my hair smoothed, my skin brighter, but at what cost? I see it in the mirror sometimes, just out of sight. A shadow with a comb. Evelyn's breath caught as she turned the page. The next entry was frantic, the handwriting jagged. April 3rd, it's not just taking my hair, it's taking me. My reflection moves when I don't. Last night I saw her, my face but not mine. Smiling, always smiling. The final entry was a single line, scrawled in what looked like rust brown ink. It wants a new bride. It's almost midnight. A cold draft snaked through the attic. Evelyn realized the air smelled faintly of lavender and something metallic. Blood. She dropped the diary as the floorboards creaked behind her. Something was in the attic with her, and it wasn't alone. The diary's brittle pages crackled under Evelyn's trembling fingers as she deciphered the faded ink. The entries grew increasingly frantic, detailing the original owner's obsession with preserving her youth. The woman, Clarissa, had been renowned for her beauty, but as age crept in, she became desperate. One entry, dated exactly a century ago, described a ritual performed at midnight, a whispered incantation, a lock of hair offered to the mirror, and the appearance of a shadowy figure holding an ornate comb. Clarissa had struck a bargain with the midnight comb, a spectral entity that promised eternal beauty in exchange for a monthly tribute. A strand of her hair, a drop of her blood, a fragment of her reflection. At first, the pact seemed a miracle. Clarissa's wrinkles vanished, her hair grew thicker, shimmering like spun silver. But the diary's tone darkened. The comb demanded more soon. She woke to find clumps of hair on her pillow, her reflection sometimes smiling when she did not. The entity wasn't just taking her offerings, it was stealing her essence, her very identity. The final entry was a scrawled warning: it lies. It always takes more. It will have all of me. Evelyn's breath caught as she turned the page to find a crude sketch of the comb, identical to the one now resting on her nightstand. Her stomach twisted. The pact wasn't broken when Clarissa vanished. It was waiting for a new host. And now, Evelyn had unknowingly accepted its terms the moment she'd touched the comb. The whispers, the midnight rituals, the hair tangled in the bristles, it wasn't just echoes of the past. The midnight comb had chosen her next. Evelyn's hands trembled as she clutched fistfuls of her own hair, the golden strands slipping through her fingers like sand. Every morning, she woke to find more of it scattered across her pillow, her scalp itching as if unseen fingers had been tugging at it all night. The antique comb still sat on her nightstand, its ornate carvings seeming to leer at her in the dim light. She tried to throw it away, but it always reappeared by the next midnight, cold to the touch and humming faintly with some unnatural energy. The reflection in her mirror was no longer her own. At first the changes were subtle, slight sharpening of the cheekbones, a darker gleam in the eyes. But with each passing night, the transformation grew more grotesque. The woman staring back at her had Evelyn's silhouette but the face of the vanished former owner, her lips curled into a knowing smile. Evelyn's own skin, meanwhile, sagged and wrinkled as though decades were passing in mere hours. Dark circles hollowed her eyes, and her bones ached with an unnatural weariness. Desperate, she scoured the diary again, searching for a way to break the curse. The pages spoke of the midnight comb as a living thing, a hungry entity that fed on beauty and youth, leaving only husks in its wake. The original owner had begged for eternal loveliness, but the price was her soul. And now, it was Evelyn's turn to pay. She tried to resist the compulsion to comb her hair at midnight, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until her body moved on its own, the brush sliding through her thinning locks as the reflection's grin widened. By the sixth night, Evelyn barely recognized herself. Her reflection was nearly identical to the vanished woman, while her true face was gaunt and elderly. The comb pulsed in her hand, its teeth biting into her scalp as if savoring its meal. She knew then, there was no escape. The mirror was no longer a reflection, it was a doorway, and something was waiting on the other side. Evelyn's scream froze in her throat as her fingers continued their rhythmic motion, the antique brush gliding through the ghostly woman's silken hair. The air thickened with the scent of rose oil and something older, something decayed beneath the perfume. The reflection in the mirror no longer mirrored her at all. It was the woman from the diary, her face porcelain, perfect, her eyes black pools of hunger. Evelyn's own face, visible at the edges of the glass, was gaunt, wrinkled, her hair wispy and grey. Her hands trembled, but the brush moved with a will of its own, each stroke pulling more vitality from her body. The woman's lips curled into a smile as she lifted a hand, not a reflection, but flesh and bone, and pressed it against Evelyn's wrist, guiding the brush in slow, deliberate sweeps. "You've been chosen," she murmured, her voice like rustling silk. "The comb demands its due." Evelyn tried to pull away, but her limbs were no longer her own. The room darkened around them, the walls dissolving into shadows, until only the mirror remained, a gaping maw between worlds. With a final stroke, the woman turned fully toward her, stepping free of the glass. Evelyn felt her grip on the brush tighten as she was pulled forward, her body passing through the mirror's surface as if it were water. The last thing she saw was her own reflection left behind in the glass, young and vibrant again, its eyes wide with terror as the woman's laughter echoed in the void. On the nightstand, the brush lay innocently clean and waiting, as the clock struck midnight once more.